Ann's going to talk to us about some scams and things that come across her desk as Commonwealth attorney that will be a benefit to you. Thank you very much. Come on in.
Bill, he left you a minute and a half. You want to talk some more?
She could have my minute, man.
Well, I didn't think Bill had any trouble using that up.
You keep talking, I'll let you know.
You got that 20-minute note? All right. Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody here today, and it's also good to see that very few people slipped out the back door after lunch. Looks like a full house. Bill kind of stole my introduction, but as he said, my name's Gardner. I am the acting Commonwealth attorney for Alleghany County. For the past 14 years, I served as Ed Stein's chief deputy Commonwealth attorney until he took the bench and became a circuit court judge on July 1st. And after 25 years as a prosecutor, I am running for Commonwealth attorney of Alleghany in the November election. And after that, I look forward to continuing my work with our law enforcement agencies to try to keep this community a safe place. Now, our office handles criminal cases. You've heard a lot of estate work and estate planning information. We don't do that. We do exclusively criminal cases, and usually after they've been investigated by the Sheriff's Department or the State Police or one of our local police departments. When we see crimes against seniors, they fall into 4 major categories. I'm not going to talk about all of those because Bill will give me the 2-minute warning way before I'm finished if I do. But basically those 4 categories are adult abuse and neglect, scams, which I'm going to focus on today, theft, and fiduciary crimes or financial crimes. And I'm gonna give that to Sean. And I'll tell you why later. I'll tell you a little bit about Sean a little bit later in the presentation. But I'm going to focus primarily on scams because that's what everybody hears about. But just as an overview of what we see with senior law, there aren't very many laws in Virginia that are tailored to address crimes against seniors. There is, and you don't need to know statute numbers, but there's 182369, which criminalizes abuse and neglect of an incapacitated adult, and that includes 18 and up. It's 18 years and older for someone who's incapacitated, and a violation of that can be anything from a Class 1 misdemeanor up to a felony, depending on the circumstances. So that exists, and that protects 18 and older who are incapacitated. 182178.1 deals with financial exploitation of mentally incapacitated people. And those cases are deemed larceny. And Sean will talk probably a little bit about that. He may not mention that statute, but the things he's covering will address that. But one of the things that we do have that is helpful, I think, for us, is there are mandatory reporting laws. And that means that certain categories of people, of healthcare workers, etc., have to report to Adult Protective Services if they believe that there is abuse or neglect going on with an adult. And that's a very, very good tool. So we have the mandatory reporting, and so that would include law enforcement officers, medical professionals, EMS workers, caregivers, any kind of paid caregivers. So that's a good tool, and that's the way we find out about things. But don't think that you have to be one of those, into one of those categories to report. Anybody can report suspected adult abuse, neglect, abuse, anything that they think is inappropriate. You can report that, and there's actually a hotline. Adult Protective Services has a hotline, and I believe that if you look at, this book is in your packet, and there are some good things in here. And they talk about the hotline on page 97 of that book, and I think that'll probably get you to Richmond. Call our local Adult Protective Services too, but anybody can report, don't forget that. If you see something that looks like it's wrong. Elder abuse generally falls into most of the time our regular criminal statutes. And as I said before, we've got the abuse and neglect. If you look at your book, on page 96 and 97. I'm not going to go over it, but it talks about some signs to look for. It talks about signs so that you can recognize if somebody is being abused or if they're being neglected. It talks about methods to prevent that from happening, and it also talks about reporting and how to report it. So abuse and neglect. And the second area, like I said before, that we see are scams. And I'm going to focus in just a minute on scams because that's what people hear about, and there are some good ones out there. Theft. You have a caregiver who steals your credit card, who steals your checkbook, who steals your jewelry, who steals your car. This might be a family member. It might be a hired caregiver. Maybe you loan them your credit card to go out and buy some groceries, and they decide to take it and go on a free-for-all and spend whatever they want. And then we're at the local banks getting all the videos of them at the ATM putting your card in. So those are categories of theft that fall under the general laws that we have to work with. And then finally, there's financial exploitation, and that's when people get to your bank account. And Sean is the expert on that. I'm going to let him cover that. And there's actually, the code encourages financial institutions to report that when they see it happening, because you don't know what's going on. A lot of times people are in your bank account doing things you don't realize that it's going on. So now I'm going to focus on scams, because that's the thing that Bill asked me to talk about, and that's the thing that it's like a revolving door. Scams are like hairstyles. They go in and out of fashion. And so I actually called the Attorney General's office. They've got a fraud unit in the Attorney General's office, and I know some folks down there in Richmond. And I called them just because I wanted to see what's in vogue, what are the current scams, what do we see most often now. So think to yourselves, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but think to yourselves, have I ever been the victim of a scam or the potential victim of a scam? Has anybody ever tried to scam me? And maybe by the time I finish talking, you'll realize that has happened, because these people are clever and they take advantage. They take advantage of people's good nature. The reason that these fraudsters are successful is because we want to believe people. We don't want to be distrusting. We want to believe the things that people say to us. And that's how they manage to work their trade. They're fraudsters, con artists, whatever you want to call them. But in some of the reading that I've done, everybody seems to agree that the older Americans are the fastest growing target group for these fraudsters. They're the most frequently encountered scams are the things I'm going to go over. I could talk for days and never get through all of them. I don't know all of them because they're constantly evolving. If the first scam doesn't work, they tweak it a little bit and they find a way for it to work better. And that's why I called the AG's office, just to see what are they seeing now. And so some of these we've been seeing forever. So the first one that I wanted to go over is the home improvement scam. And I've had this happen in Alleghany, and I've had it happen, I hesitate to say this because Bill was bashing on Roanoke attorneys, but I was an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Roanoke City for 12 years, or just about 12 years, and while I was there, we had a lot of home improvement scams. They show up at the home uninvited, they offer to fix something or to pave your driveway. Roofing scams and pavement scams were big, they still are, but really big back in the 90s. And it's still going on. And what they do is they want payment up front, they want to get their money, and they either do shoddy work and charge you an exorbitant fee, or they take your money and just don't come back. But when I was in Roanoke City, we had, they were called the English Travelers. They actually did I saw TV documentaries on them because they were such a big deal. And strangely enough, they hailed from some place called Stumpy Bottom, West Virginia. But yeah, I'm not kidding. But the state police had, that was back, before all the computers and everything, they had reams of free-ring binders with all these, they had dossiers on these people. And what they had trucks, they had fleets of trucks, and they'd roll into people's driveways. They had signage, they had signs on their trucks, they looked all official. And they would offer to do paving jobs. They were the bane of my existence in Roanoke for a long time. They would offer to do these paving jobs, and what they do is they lay down some strip of something that looked like blacktop on the driveway, roll off, and never come back. Sometimes they'd even be willing to drive you to the bank. And I'm not kidding, that actually happened. And they had their own lawyer. His last name was Downs, and he came out of Norfolk or somewhere, but they always called this one guy. I don't know why, he didn't know what he was doing, but they called him. I think he was probably one of them. But these people, they were all in the same family. But anyway, so the paving scams were big, they're still going on, roofing scams are still going on. And so when I had the paving scam situations, and I still do it now, we call it DPOR, the Department of Professions and Occupational Regulation. Sometimes I forget what it's actually called because I call it DPOR, but they've actually got an investigator, and they've got a hotline for older Virginians to call if you get scammed. The investigator that's working there now, I used to work with in Roanoke, he was one of my investigators there. Used to be a guy named Vernon Reynolds worked there, and Vernon was all over the Gypsy papers. He knew him by name. But anyway, so on that front, if you were approached by one of these people, some suggestions, ask to see a license if they come up to your driveway and offer to do this, because contractors have to have licenses, and DPOR, they know about that. They know whether these people are licensed or not. They have different. Ask if they're insured, if they're bonded. Ask for references. And please try to get everything in writing. Get a contract in writing if you can, a written contract, and that way you'll have something to stand on. But be very careful about trying to be rushed into something like that, because they are successful because they force people into acting without thinking. So licenses, references, you think it's happened to you, call DPOR and report it so they can be aware that it's going on. So I'm sure probably, I'm moving on to the next one now because I could spend more time on that, but I won't. Many of you probably have grandkids, and many of you probably have grandkids that don't live around here, that you don't see all that often. You try to keep up with them, but you don't hear their voices that often, and you don't see them that often. Well, there's a grandparent scam, and my father was a victim of it. He had one of these calls about my nephew. And what they do is they'll call up and they will pretend to be your grandchild. And they are in distress for some reason or the other. They're in jail and they got to make bond, or they got to pay for an attorney, or they've wrecked their car or something like that. And they get you to believe that they are your grandchild and they're in need of money and they want you to send them money. So just be aware that that's out there. And one of the tricks that they use is they say, oh, please don't tell mom and dad, because they'll just kill me if they know about this. So keep it quiet, don't tell mom and dad. So that one's out there, and that's one of the ones the Attorney General mentioned. That's happening a lot. Some suggestions on how to deal with that. Ask the caller questions. Ask questions that only your grandchild would know. What's the pet's name, so forth. Chances are, if that's happening, it's a scam. But if you want to find out, ask them some questions that they can't know by going online or doing the research. Hang up. Don't engage them. Just hang up. Call your grandchild. Make sure they're all right, but don't engage them in that. And here's the big one. I read an article from last month. Campbell County was having a big problem with this one, and that's the Social Security number scam. The July article about Campbell County, they were getting a lot of calls. So you get a call, and the caller says that your Social Security number has been suspended. Right. Because of illegal activity, or because it was involved in a crime, or whatever thing that they can make up, but it's been suspended. And they want you to confirm your Social Security number over the phone to them. Don't do it. They may even want you to withdraw money from your account before it's closed. Some suggestions on how to deal with that. I always like to hang up. I feel very powerful when I just hang the phone on, because you can do that. They're intruding on your life. Hang up on them. Never give out personal information over the phone. The government is not going to ask you for your Social Security number over the phone or any other personal information, so don't do that. Never wire money to an unknown person. Government agencies aren't going to ask for money either over the phone. Now here's the thing, a lot of people have caller ID, some don't, some do. Don't believe your caller ID, because these people are so good that they do what's called spoofing. So they can make a number pop up on your caller ID, and it might look like the Social Security hotline when they call. They can make whatever they want pop up there because they can spoof. I can't tell you how it works. I just know that it works. It's like flipping on a light switch. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know it turns the light on. So they spoof and they put fake numbers up on your caller ID, so don't trust it. So the Social Security scam is out there too. Then there's another one called phishing, and strangely they spell that P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G. And that's when you get a text or an email telling you that there's a problem with your bank account. There's always a problem with something, and it's strange you don't know about all these problems until these people tell you. There's a problem with your bank account and they need you to verify your Social Security number and your PIN. Don't do it. They'll use that information to steal your identity. Banks and legitimate businesses are not going to ask you for that information over the phone. They're not going to ask you for any private information like that. So if they email or text or call asking for that information, don't do it. Phony prescription plans. This is another good one. You'll get a letter or a phone call or something offering a low-cost prescription plan, and what you don't know is the pharmacies aren't going to honor that. Sometimes they appear to come from the government or from Medicare, and they not only do the pharmacies not honor these, but sometimes what you might get could be counterfeit medication that could actually hurt you. So it's best to just go through your doctor and go through your insurance and use whatever you have, and don't be interested in any of that. And then the funeral scams. Yeah, you have people out there that are so low, and I guess they get lower, but they're so low that they'll scan the obituaries, they'll read them, and they'll find out a little bit of information, and then they'll call you up, they'll contact the widow or the widower, somebody who's grieving, and that's really low. Somebody who's grieving, and they will claim that there's money owed, that there was money owed by the deceased. There was some debt, or there was some loan, or there was something, and that you need to make good on that loan, and they're going to want money. Don't fall for that. Medical quackery, natural cures, weight loss, hair regrowth, drugs, miracles. Don't fall for that. Always ask your doctor. You want some of that? Always ask your doctor about that. That's just another one that's out there. And then there's the sweetheart scam. Now, that can come via email, social media. Believe it or not, it's out there. There are people who will make contact with you on social media or somehow and befriend you, and sometimes even indicate a romantic interest, and they will get into your bank account. They will have some issue, they will have some crisis that they, as your friend, need you to help them with. This really happens, and they will want your money. They will want your bank account numbers. And there are people who have been victimized and have been scammed and have paid out thousands and thousands of dollars. We had one coming out of our jail in about 2013. It was a little bit of a different twist, but this fellow was in jail because he'd been ripping off some of our local businesses, and he found out the name. Oh, I better hurry. You can tell stories, Bill. Why can't I? Anyway, long story short, he found out the name of his cellmate's mother, and he called her, and he asked her for her bank account information, and he promised her the world. And when I did a little research on him, and I actually drove all over this part of the state with my investigator, I found 5 other women who'd been doing that too. Because Jerry had been incarcerated most of the time since 1979, and every time he got incarcerated, he'd find another woman. And I got them all together for the sentencing hearing. He's doing 15 years. That was a fun one. All right, take-home points from this. Just, it's all common sense, but resist the urge to act quickly. That's how they win, is they make you feel pressured, like you have to make a decision. Very few things have to be done now or even tomorrow. You can hang up the phone, or say, no thank you, I'll think about it. Don't be pressured to act quickly. As I said before, never wire money, don't give personal information out. Make sure contractors are licensed, make sure you keep records and keep your contracts in writing. Most of these people won't do that. And finally, most importantly, report anything that's suspicious. Call the sheriff's department, call one of the numbers that's in your, there's an index in the book that you were given, and there are a lot of contact numbers there. Report it so that somebody knows it's going on. That's how we combat it, to know about it. Now, financial crimes, I told you I wasn't going to address that. And poor Sean, I hate to dump something else on Sean, because I think every other attorney that stood up here and said, well, we're just going to let Sean talk about that. But when I hired Sean is our new assistant Commonwealth attorney. He started on July 1st. And the way I met him is that he was the conservator in a civil case where a lot of money was stolen, and there were criminal embezzlement cases going on at the same time, which our office was handling. And the way he researched and the diligence and the thoroughness that he used when he went through all of those records impressed me to the point where I knew that he would be an asset to our office. And in terms of handling senior abuse and financial exploitation, he will be an asset. So I'm gonna turn it over at this point to Sean Mabry. I'll let Bill has to do his introduction first. Here's your speaker.